Good morning, dear students. In this video, I will continue with Act 4, Scene 1. In the previous video, I had stopped at a point in the story where the Duke, who was the judge in the case, had tried to persuade, convince and influence Shylock to change his mind, to change on his stance on the demand of holding the trial of Antonio in court in the strictest possible manner, following the law of the land in accordance with the Charter of Venice, and that he be granted the penalty to which he was entitled according to the law of the land. The Duke had indirectly requested Shylock to forgive Antonio the penalty, and not only that, do without a fraction on the capital amount which Antonio had borrowed from him, to forego a part of what Antonio had borrowed from him, the 3,000 ducats. He said that Shylock should take examples from the Turks and Tartars. Even the Turks and Tartars, taking into consideration the pathetic, poor, desperate financial and human condition of Antonio, would show mercy, show sympathy and empathy towards Antonio. He should be merciful and forgive Antonio. He had tried his best. But Shylock was bent on having the penalty to which he said he was entitled according to the law of the land. So in reply to the Duke, Shylock said, please follow your text. What did he say? Shylock said, I have possessed your grace of what I purpose, and by a holy Sabbath have I sworn to have the due and forfeit of my bond. What did he say? He said that he had already told His Grace the Duke of his intentions, what he desired, what he expected the court, the Duke, who was the judge in the case, and the jury, to hold the trial of Antonio in the strictest possible manner and grant him the penalty to which he was entitled according to the contract which he had signed with Antonio at the time when he had lent out the 3,000 ducats to Antonio. Then he went on to say that he had sworn by the sacred day of Sabbath. Sabbath is still today for the Jews, the seventh day of the Jewish week, which is kept aside as a day of prayer and worship of God. So he said that he had made this solemn sacred promise, swearing on the sacred day of Sabbath, that he would definitely obtain or get the penalty that was due to him, that he lawfully was entitled, which the court still had to grant it to him. The forfeit of my bond means the penalty to which he was entitled and the court needed to grant it to him following the court trial. And he was bent on the court granting the penalty to him. So again I repeat, what did he say? He said that he had sworn by the sacred day of prayer, the Sabbath, that he would definitely obtain or get the penalty that was due to him according to the terms and conditions which were mentioned in the bond which Antonio had signed at the time when he had borrowed the 3,000 ducats. Then he went on to say, if you deny it, let the danger light upon your charter and your city's freedom. So he said, if the duke, the jury and the court not permit or grant him to have the penalty to which he was entitled according to the contract which Antonio had signed with him, then in that case, let the danger of violation fall upon the Charter of Venice. The Charter was this special document by the help of which Venice was declared independent. He said, if he would not be granted the penalty according to the law, in that case, let the danger of violation fall upon the charter, the freedom of the city, and the freedom of the people, the special rights which foreigners like him and international traders enjoyed, protected by the law of the land, the Charter of Venice. He said, let the violation fall upon the Charter of Venice and the freedom of the people, especially foreign traders like him in Venice. You'll ask me why I rather choose to have a weight of Carian flesh than to receive 3,000 ducats. I'll not answer that. What did he mean to say by that? He said that if they had this question in mind, if they were to ask him why he was interested, why he would rather choose to have, why he rather preferred to have that 1 pound of rotten flesh of a man to the 3,000 ducats that were being offered to him at that point of time, if the court, the jury and everybody else present in court, if they had this question in mind, if they would ask him why he was bent on, why he rather would have that 1 pound of rotten flesh of a man than to accept the 3,000 ducats which were being offered to him at that point of time, then he said that he would not answer that at all. He denied to answer it at all. He then went on to say, but say it is my humor, he said, but let them suppose, let them consider it as his whim, as his strange desire, as his fanciful desire. Let them consider it as his fanciful whimsical, strange desire. Is it answered? He said. He questioned the court, the duke, and the jury. Had he answered them all, if they had this question, why he was so bent on having a pound of rotten flesh of a man than to accept the 3,000 ducats. What if my house, he went on to say next, be troubled with a rat, and I be pleased to give 10,000 ducats to have it banned? What? Are you answered yet? So he went on to cite an example, give an example to justify his demand of having that 1 pound of flesh as a penalty to which he was entitled according to the contract he had signed with Antonio. He went on to say, supporting his demand of the penalty being granted to him, saying that what if his house were to be troubled by a rat? It was totally up to him, his pleasure and his personal decision or discretion that he spend a good huge sum of 10,000 ducats to hunt the rat down and poison it to death. It was his pleasure. It was his personal discretion and wish. It was his fancy that he pay a huge sum of 10,000 ducats to hunt that rat down, poison it to death. And it had nothing to do with anybody else. What are you answered? And he went on to say, what are you answered yet? Had he answered the court, if they had this question in mind, why he preferred to have a pound of rotten flesh of a man to the 3,000 ducats that were being offered at that point of time to him. Some men there are love not a gaping pig, some that are mad if they behold a cat, and others when the bagpipe sings, I the nose cannot contain. For affection, mistress of passion, sways it to the mood of what it likes or loathes. What did he mean to say? He went on to give some more examples, in fact 3 more examples, to substantiate, to support his strange, fanciful, whimsical desire to have that pound of flesh. And what did he go on to say? He said that there were some men who were displeased at the sight, who were unhappy and hated the sight of a roasted head of a pig displayed on a platter with its mouth open. There was no logical explanation or reason to give why they hated the sight of a roasted head of a pig with its mouth open displayed on a platter. He said that some people, some men that are mad, they get extremely angry at the sight of a cat. They lose their temper at the sight of a cat and Yet there were others, he said, they lost their self-control and they would get extremely furious at the sound of the bagpiper being played. They would lose their self-control, get fierce and furious at the shrill, high-pitched notes of the bagpiper being played. As there was no logical explanation or reason to give why did they do so, there was no logical reason or explanation to give for him to the court, the duke and the jury regarding his desire to have that 1 pound of flesh. Then he went on to say, for affection, mistress of passion, sways it to the mood of what it likes or loathes. Meaning to say that personal inclination, personal instincts, he refers to as affection. He said because personal inclination, personal tendency, the tendency to do something which is instinctive. We all have instincts. We have instincts of hunger, anger, defending ourselves. So he says, because personal inclination, personal tendency to do something which he regards as affection is the ruler of all emotions. He says instincts give birth to emotions in all men. And instincts rules or guides, controls and guides our emotions to like certain things and to dislike certain things. So instincts rule and give birth to our emotions. It guides us to like and dislike certain things. In your book, it mentions that prejudice, this illogical argument or feeling of prejudice, the feeling of superiority and this feeling of disgust towards others controls one's emotions and forces one to dislike or like certain things. But you follow what I am saying. He says that because personal inclination, personal tendency, instincts, which he calls affection, is the ruler of any emotion, which he calls passion, and this personal inclination or tendency or instinct guides, directs the emotion of a person to like certain things and dislike certain things. So was it with him. His personal tendency was guiding him to dislike accepting the 3,000 ducats and liking to accept the penalty in the form of 1 pound of flesh from Antonio. And there was nothing that he could do. Now for your answer, he said. Had he answered to the question which the court, the jury, the duke might have as to his preference of the 1 pound of flesh to the 3,000 ducats. As there is no firm reason to be rendered, as he said, there was no logical explanation, no rational explanation, no reasonable explanation to be given in the case why certain people cannot tolerate the sight of the head of a pig roasted with its mouth open displayed on a plate or platter. Why certain men or people get angry at the sight when they behold, when they encounter or see, or at the sight of a harmless, necessary cat. He calls the cat harmless, necessary, meaning a cat does not cause harm. In fact, it is a useful animal because it keeps the house free from rats. Why certain people cannot tolerate, get angry at the sight of a harmless, necessary cat. Why certain people lose their self-control, their temper, and get extremely angry at the sound of the shrill notes of a bagpiper being played, a bagpiper which was usually wrapped in a woolen cloth. Why certain people lose their self-control, get furious at the shrill notes of the bagpiper being played or wrapped in a woolen cloth. As there was no logical explanation, there was no logical explanation in his case of wanting that 1 pound of flesh instead of the 3,000 ducats that were being offered to him at that point of time. Must yield to such inevitable shame as to offend himself being offended. He says, justifying himself, his situation and demand, his feeling of wanting that 1 pound of flesh, clarifying with a quote that he goes on to say that one must submit, must yield to such unavoidable, shameful behavior that when one is offended, he must offend in the same shameful manner which he is offended shamefully. So he says that a person like him, when forced, being shamefully offended by others, in this case Antonio and Bassanio, when forced, when compelled, has to behave in such a shameful manner that he was at that point of time, when he is offended shamefully by others. So he says in simple words, but when he himself is offended, when he was offended by Antonio and Bassanio, when he himself is offended, he is compelled, he is forced to react in a shameful manner to which he needed to submit himself. He is forced to react in that shameful manner that he must offend others who offend him or who has offended him shamefully. If he had not been offended by others in that shameful manner, he would not have been forced to shamefully offend in turn them. Next, he went on to say that more than a lodged hate and a certain loathing, I bear Antonio that I follow thus a losing suit against him. You answered, he went on to say, more than a deep-rooted hate that he had in his heart for him, and a certain inexplicable something that he could not explain, a certain feeling of long-standing hate that he had for him, that he bore in his heart for him. There was no other reason that he could give to the court for his demand of wanting that 1 pound of flesh. And he said, now that he was pursuing, he was following this case in which he was losing a lot of money, and there was no profit in it. So, it was in a way causing him a loss. So why would the court, the jury and the duke be so interested to know why he wanted that 1 pound of flesh? You answered, he demanded to know from the court, the duke and the jury, had they all been answered regarding why he was so bent on, or why he wanted that 1 pound of flesh from Antonio as a penalty lawfully due to him, because Antonio had signed and agreed to the condition when he had borrowed the 3,000 ducats. In the next video, gentlemen, I will carry on with the remaining part of this scene. Thank you.